I don't remember the exact day the virus hit me. Not in the way I remember birthdays or Christmases or even fights. It wasn't sudden, not like a fall or a scream, but more like a slow, invisible fog that crept in and started unmaking me from the inside out. They told me it was viral encephalitis. I was just a kid, 10 years old. One minute I was at home, probably watching cartoons or pestering someone for snacks, and the next I was being rushed to hospital with a headache that felt like lightning behind my eyes and a body that wouldn't listen to me anymore. I didn't know what the brain was really until mine started shutting down. The fear wasn't just in what was happening to me, it was in everyone's faces. Doctors, nurses, even my parents, though I won't go into that part. I saw something in their eyes I'd never seen before, that look of not knowing if I'd wake up, not knowing what I'd be like if I did. And when I did wake up, something was missing. I couldn't speak. At first, I thought maybe I was just too tired. My throat hurt. My mouth felt slow, but then I tried again, and nothing came out except panic. They say speech loss after encephalitis isn't uncommon. That didn't make it feel any less cruel. I could think, I could understand, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't scream. I couldn't ask what was wrong. I couldn't even ask if something was wrong. I was trapped in my own head, fully aware and completely voiceless. People talk about silence as peaceful. That wasn't my kind of silence. Mine was loud with everything I wanted to say but couldn't. Loud with questions, loud with fear, loud with frustration. It wasn't quiet at all. It was screaming inside. I became the kid who couldn't talk. That's what people saw. But I hadn't lost my mind, just my voice. It felt like I didn't belong anywhere anymore, like I'd been shoved outside the world and couldn't find a way back in. And even when speech started to come back, painfully, slowly, in fragments, it wasn't really mine. What came out was flat, monotone, lifeless, like I'd been replaced with a recording of myself. No tone, no emotion, just words that sounded like someone else had spoken them through me. That voice didn't feel like home. That voice didn't feel like me. That's the thing I've never really been able to explain to people, how much you lose when you lose your voice. Not just the sound, but the self, the connection, the ability to shape your identity in real time. Without it, you're just a body with ideas no one can hear. I spent about a year in that place, working on speech, practicing endlessly, speaking into recorders, repeating words like it was all that mattered. And it was, in a way. My whole life became about saying things right, one syllable at a time, like learning how to be human again. But no one told me how lonely it would be, how boring, how exhausting, or how it would still feel like my voice didn't quite belong to me, even when I got it back. That was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be cut off from the world. Not because you want to be, not because you're quiet, but because something took away your way to exist in it. And that's where it all started. Not the scambaiting, not the Twitch streams, not the fake grandmas or nervous laughter, just the silence and the aching need to be heard. When people think about recovery, they usually imagine steady progress. They picture dramatic breakthroughs, a light switch moment. Mine wasn't like that. Regaining speech after encephalitis wasn't a climb. It was a crawl. Every syllable was a war. At first, even the most basic sounds came out wrong or not at all. I had to relearn how to shape words with my mouth, how to control my breath, how to make myself sound human again. I watched my own face in mirrors, listened to myself on tape, practiced the same words again and again until they stopped making sense. Nobody ever tells you how humiliating it is to say the word banana 30 times in a row while someone else writes down how bad it sounded. It became a routine. Wake up, practice, eat, practice, sleep, repeat. Every day revolved around speech, but there was no passion in it, no joy. It was like being in a prison with only one allowed activity, trying to sound normal. I missed being spontaneous, missed being funny, missed being heard. What I got in return was a flat, toneless voice that made everything I said sound hollow, like an answer phone message that had come to life. Eventually I could talk again, but it didn't feel like me who was talking. And honestly, after a year of fighting for it, I started to wonder if it was even worth it. When my speech returned, people expected me to be fine. They heard me talking and assumed I was fixed, but I wasn't. My voice was a blunt tool, technically functional, emotionally numb. I sounded bored even when I was excited. I sounded detached even when I was afraid. No matter what I felt inside, the outside world just heard flatness. The worst part? They treated me like I didn't care. I'd say something important and people would brush it off. I'd try to explain how I was feeling and they'd assume I was being sarcastic or emotionless. It was like the words didn't count unless they came with the right tone, and mine didn't. That disconnect grew inside me like a second illness, one that nobody else could see. Even today, I still carry that voice, and sometimes that same misunderstanding. But eventually, years later, that voice would become something scammers trusted, something they mistook for a vulnerable old man or woman. But back then, it just felt like a cruel joke. By the time my voice was strong enough to hold a conversation, I'd grown to resent the practice itself. It felt robotic, empty, like I was doing exercises for someone else's benefit. I'd repeat tongue twisters, read scripts aloud, count to 100. None of it made me feel connected to what I was saying. The words were exercises, not communication. Speech therapy had become a ritual without purpose. I needed more than repetition. I needed interaction. I wanted something unpredictable, something real, something that would make me forget I was practicing. But I didn't know what that was yet, and I didn't know how to ask for it, not just because of the speech, but because I didn't know what I needed. That all changed the morning I saw someone on TV talking about cold calls. It was just a normal day, and I was half watching Good Morning Britain. I don't remember much about the other segments, something about the weather, maybe politics, but one part made me sit up. There was a man talking about scam phone calls where Windows technician or a bank employee tells you something's wrong and demands access to your computer or your money. But instead of getting angry or hanging up, this man said he messed with them, wasted their time, confused them, turned their own scam against them. He wasn't doing it for revenge, he was doing it because he found it funny, because it gave him a sense of control. And because it didn't really matter what he said, the scammer would stay on the line regardless. And something clicked in me. This was it. This was the unscripted practice I needed. Not drills, not reciting poems, but actual conversation. A place where I could talk nonsense without pressure, no judgment, no one correcting me, just me holding a conversation on my own terms. I thought I could do that. Even more than that. I need to do that. The internet back then wasn't what it is now. No YouTube tutorials, no Reddit forums, no scambaiting subcultures. Just clunky forums and slow dial-up connections that made a phone call impossible if someone else was online. But I was determined. I searched for every scam-related mailing list I could find. I subscribed to newsletters, surveys, dodgy sweepstakes, anything I thought might land me on a scammer's radar. I filled out forms with fake names. I gave fake information. I even signed up as an elderly person in hopes I'd seem like a good target. And slowly, it worked. The calls started coming. They were clumsy at first, obvious lies, heavy accents and bad scripts. But I didn't care. I wasn't trying to outsmart them. I just wanted to talk. At first, I'd just follow their lead, repeat back phrases, ask fake questions, mishear things on purpose. It was exhilarating. A strange mix of fear, joy, and practice. Real practice. The kind that actually pushed my speech, not in the way therapy did, but in a way that felt alive. And because of my voice, that flat, dry monotone I hated so much, the scammers stuck around. They thought I was vulnerable. They thought I was easy. That in its own way gave me power. The first time I answered a scam call, I felt like I was being watched. Not by anyone in particular, just the world. It was that vulnerable. My hand trembled when I picked up the phone, and for a moment I froze, thinking I'd made a mistake. Then I heard the line crackle and a heavily rehearsed voice say, "Hello, ma'am, I'm calling from Microsoft." I wasn't a ma'am, and they weren't from Microsoft, but none of that mattered. I remember trying to respond. My mouth felt slow, stiff, uncertain, but I said something, probably hello or yes, in my droning, awkward voice, and the scammer lit up. They thought I was confused. They thought I was someone's gran. And for once, that worked for me. We talked for nearly 15 minutes. I kept repeating things wrong, asked nonsense questions, said I didn't understand. My voice was terrible, my timing was off. But it didn't matter, he stayed on the line. And that was the victory, he stayed. Not because he cared, but because he thought I was vulnerable. That was the key. And when I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a year. Relief, a weird, dirty sort of joy. Like I'd tricked someone back, not for revenge, but for therapy. I had spoken for 15 full minutes. Not practiced, not repeated, not scripted, spoken. That's what it became over time, talking just to be heard. I didn't need deep conversations. I didn't need truth. I just needed sound, interaction, flow. Scambaiting wasn't a strategy at first. It was medicine. I didn't call them for fun. I didn't record anything. I didn't even know it was a thing. It was just me whispering out of the darkness, using scammers as my unwilling therapy partners. And the irony? They were the only ones who didn't interrupt me, didn't correct me, didn't laugh at my voice. They just stayed. Because they thought they could take something from me, and instead I took something from them. Time. A few minutes where I existed again, where my voice mattered. Even now, I still can't fully describe how weirdly validating that felt. They'd believe my monotone, the same one that made me feel broken and small in normal conversations, became an asset, a weird kind of disguise. Scammers would constantly say, "Yes, ma'am," or "Don't worry, grandpa." They heard confusion in my tone, even when I wasn't confused. They heard weakness. But that was the trick. They misunderstood me, and I let them. Over time, I started to get more clever. I'd pretend to hear things wrong. I'd waste their time looping back through the same conversation. I'd pretend I couldn't find the start button on my computer. And still, they stayed because they thought they were closing in on someone easy. And I started to realize something important. This wasn't just therapy anymore. This was escape. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about speech and started being about survival. When I was baiting a scammer, I wasn't me, not in the way I normally was. Trapped by trauma, by fatigue, by the weight of everything unsaid. When I baited, I was free. No history, no pressure, no expectations, just a voice saying things that didn't have to make sense. Playing, pushing back, existing outside of everything. I never made up full characters. No fake names, no silly accents, just slight tweaks. I let the scammers project who they thought I was. That made it even easier to disappear into the role. And when the call ended, I felt emptied out. In a good way, like I'd been somewhere else for a little while, somewhere safer. I couldn't explain that to anyone, not even to therapists later on. They didn't understand. To them, it sounded like avoidance. But to me, it was survival. Scambaiting became my portal. When things were bad, when the flashbacks were loud, when I couldn't face the world, when I didn't even feel real, I could pick up a call and go somewhere else. I could be the confused grandparent, the slow, careful man who just didn't understand, the polite victim they thought would crumble. And in that role, I was in control. The irony wasn't lost on me. Scammers prey on the vulnerable, but in my case, they were helping me find strength. Not intentionally, of course, but that didn't matter. The result was the same. They gave me the only space where I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to tell them about PTSD, or the virus, or the panic attacks. They didn't care who I was, and that's why it worked, because I got to forget who I was too. Even during calls, sometimes the panic still crept in. I could be mid-conversation with a scammer, voice steady, flow going okay, and then bang, that sudden rush of heat through my chest, the breath that caught, the voice that cracked. It didn't matter how good the call was going. PTSD doesn't care about logic, and it's not the kind of panic you can explain to a scammer. I'd sit there, sweating, trying not to gag or cry, while someone on the other end talked about fake banking errors or computer viruses. My hand would shake. My mind would tell me, just hang up, just stop. But I wouldn't, because something in me needed to finish, even if I was spiraling inside. That was the thing people didn't understand. It wasn't just a hobby, it wasn't a game. Sometimes it was the only structure I had, the only reason I hadn't curled up in silence again. If I could just keep the call going, I wasn't totally lost. Even if I was breaking down, I was still there. I didn't plan to record anything at first. I wasn't looking for followers or validation, but one day I wondered, what if I could hear how far I've come? So I plugged in a cheap mic and recorded a scam call. It was messy, my breathing was off, my speech stumbled, but I could hear something new, a rhythm, a flow that hadn't been there a year ago. My voice was still flat, but it was present, and I had kept someone on the line for nearly half an hour. It wasn't for content, it was for proof. Proof that I still existed. Then, one day, I uploaded a clip anonymously. Not for clout, just to see if anyone out there knew what this was like. The comments trickled in. People laughed at the scammer. A few mentioned how calm I sounded. Someone said, "You've got the perfect scammer voice, they'll never hang up." That was the first time it occurred to me. Maybe there's a place for me in this world after all. It took years before I went live. I watched others do it, the loud ones, the comedians, the pranksters. They had characters and costumes and funny soundboards. I didn't have that. I didn't want it. I just wanted to talk, to escape, to feel something other than dread. When I finally did it, opened OBS, stared at the Go Live button, I felt physically sick. My fingers hovered. My stomach turned. What if I froze? What if no one came? What if people heard my voice and just laughed? But I did it anyway, because I had to. And the strangest thing happened. People stayed. Not just because of the scammers, not because of flashy edits or funny voices. They stayed for me. They heard something in the way I talked, the quiet defiance, the calm chaos. They saw the escape I was building in real time. And some of them said, "This helps me too." That's when I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was connecting. But it also brought new fear, because now I wasn't just a voice in the dark. I was Lee. I was me. And that meant people could see when I struggled, hear when the panic made my words slow, feel the pauses when I needed to breathe. Some days I'd sit there trying to keep a scammer on the line while my hands were numb and my chest felt like it was caving in. I'd smile through it, keep my tone even, joke with chat. But afterward, I'd collapse. Sometimes I wouldn't speak for hours. Other times I'd cry and not even know why, because even though it was escape, it cost me too. Streaming isn't easy when your trauma is in your throat, when your voice is the thing you both rely on and fear, but I kept doing it because the alternative was silence, and I already knew what too much silence could do to me. Here's the part I always hesitate to say out loud. I enjoy it, not the scammers, not what they do, God no, but the process, the fight, the way my brain sharpens and steadies when I bait. For a few minutes or hours, I'm not the broken kid who lost their voice. I'm not the one hiding from phone calls or breathing in the bathroom to survive. I'm the one in control. And yeah, that feels good. Too good sometimes, because it clashes hard with reality, the knowledge that these people hurt others. They scam old folks, steal savings, push vulnerable people into breakdowns. So how can I justify feeling good doing this? I still haven't found the perfect answer. But the truth is, sometimes I need the call more than I need moral clarity. That's not noble. That's just survival. PTSD doesn't ask permission. Sometimes I'll be fine one day, planning bait scripts, charging the mic, and the next I can't even look at the phone without shaking. There's no logic to it. It just hits. And when it does, I disappear. I stop baiting, stop streaming, stop everything. People in chat ask if I'm okay. I don't always answer, because I'm not. I'm back in that place again, the post-virus silence, the panic breath, the cracked voice in my own throat. It's not about the scammers then, it's about staying alive moment to moment. That's why I don't scambait for content or fame. I do it because when I can't, I remember what it means to need it. Some baiters build whole identities. Granny Sue, Tech Terry, Wild Bill with the cowboy drawl. I never needed that, not because I'm better, just because I can't. When your trauma is tied to your voice, there's no room to fake more. I don't do characters. I don't put on voices. I just talk. Quiet, flat, steady, and weirdly it works. They hear me and assume I'm old or nervous or naive. That gives me power, not pretend power, real power. The power of being underestimated. And for once in my life, that becomes my advantage. The people who stay, you learn a lot about people when you stream from your own trauma. Some turn away. It's too much, too heavy, too raw. But others, they stay. They show up in chat. They message after the stream. They say, "Your voice calms me," or "You help me feel less alone." I still don't know how to accept that sometimes, but I try, because maybe they're doing for me what I thought I was doing for them. They make the silence less scary. They make me feel heard. Right now, I'm in another flare-up. I can't bait, can't talk to scammers, can barely speak on the phone without my body going into full meltdown. But I know this will pass. It always does, eventually, and when it does, I'll be back. Voice steady, heart racing, mic on, OBS open, still me, still Lee, still here, because I didn't choose this for entertainment. I chose this because it brought my voice back. And even when I lose it again, I know where to find it, in the calm before the call, in the breath before the first hello, in the space between panic and control, in that strange, defiant act of answering a scammer and talking.